Hello everyone, my name is Mark Brown and I will be giving this presentation on quantitative research article evaluation. My objective is to give this presentation to the current and future CEOs and board members of Brookshore Industries on the topic of servant leadership and its potential benefits to the organization, and to present findings to fellow board members and the current and incoming CEOs in order to help this firm make a crucial organizational decision. The goals of this presentation are to provide a framework for an accurate understanding of the article on which the future CEO wants to base a major organizational culture decision, and to convince the leadership of the merits of evidence-based management in general. And finally, to suggest an evidence-based article on servant leadership on which to ensure the long-term success of Brookshore Industries. The philosophical perspective of these articles is that the study of servant leadership theory contributes to the body of knowledge concerned with advocating an alternative perspective for roles of leaders. This theory of leadership posits that there is tangible organizational benefits in leaders' service to followers as opposed to service to self. I intend to explore the strengths and limitations of the article suggested by the organization, Article 1, as well as the proposed article, Article 2, which I posit is better and will ensure Brookshore's success moving into the future. I will cite references throughout this presentation, as well as provide a reference cite section at the end. The title of Article 1 is Achieving High Organizational Performance Through Servant Leadership by Melchar and Bosco. It was published in 2010. This article extends extant research to examine the how of servant leadership instead of the what. The authors operationalized servant leadership by describing the stated behaviors of servant leaders. Interviews and questionnaires were used. Article 1 integrated previous studies. It is easy to understand how data were collected. It points out its strengths and limitations and uses tables to explain results. 46 articles were cited. This article employs two hypotheses. Hypothesis number 1. Mid-level managers who report to servant leaders will exhibit above average levels of servant leader characteristics themselves. Hypothesis 2. There will be no difference in the observations of servant leader characteristics according to worker age, years of experience, or level of education. This research study used Barbudo and Wheeler's 2006 Servant Leader Questionnaire to assess mid-level service managers of three high-performing auto dealerships to determine whether they were considered servant leaders. It measured variables such as gender, age, education, and length of service to determine if these impacted servant leadership perceptions. Subjects of this study were mid-level managers and their employees. Qualitative interviews were conducted to determine if there were main themes that reflected the leader's servant leader proclivity. One leader from each of three organizations was interviewed. Each employee received a version of Barbudo and Wheeler's questionnaire to complete. There were 59 participants. The response rate for all employees was 27%. Note that low response among managers resulted in it not being included in the results section. Article 1 concerns are as follows. There is no clear purpose statement. article lacks definition of servant leadership. It lacks a clear problem statement. It is not logically organized. Acronyms are not clearly explained, such as ISO 9000. The results do not support the hypotheses. Only 3 high-performing organizations were selected for the study. The data collected does not make a strong case for correlation between servant leadership and high organization performance. And there was an unclear explanation of the participant to respondents. This article's self-stated limitations are as follows. Internal and external factors. Only high-performing organizations were studied. The findings were not generalizable to other organizations, and they had a small sample size of 59. However, according to Faber, this is not necessarily a limitation, but since this article lists it as a limitation, I will do that as well. And lastly, there was a low response rate. Article number 2 is titled Toward an Understanding of When and Why Servant Leadership Accounts for Employee Extra Role Behaviors. This article is by Dr. Panacio. It was published in November 2014. The purpose of this article is to contribute to servant leadership theory by examining the psychological contract, or PC, as a mediating mechanism between the supervisor-subordinate dyad. Article 2 is a time-lag longitudinal research design. Data were collected from 101 supervisor-subordinate dyads at 2 points in time by written survey. There was a 4-month lag between data collection. At that time, the researchers deemed that lag time appropriate. All participants were asked to complete a 7-point Likert type scale ranging from strongly disagree 1 to strongly agree. In this article, servant leadership was measured with a 28-item multi-dimensional scale. Psychological contract fulfillment and organizational citizenship behavior, OCBs, were assessed as well. Control variables of leader-member exchange and transformational leadership theory were used in this study. Article 2 differs from Article 1 in that it has a clear purpose statement. The definition of servant leadership was clear and logically placed. There was a clear problem statement. The article was logically organized. All acronyms were properly explained. It had 3 hypotheses. The hypotheses were accurately and honestly assessed. There was a clear explanation of the participant-respondent relationship and relevant tables and figures throughout. The implication of this study is that servant leadership impacted 3 of 5 follower behaviors throughout the psychological contract fulfillment. Another implication of the study is that it suggests that organizations should attempt to increase servant leadership behaviors. Stated limitations of this article are small sample size, only 101 participants. However, as we discussed earlier, Faber does not consider small sample sizes as a flaw. But again, since this article lists them as a limitation, I will do so as well. The study of this article is not generalizable to a larger organization. The longitudinal design could have been longer, as stated by the authors. And only 2 production and distribution companies based in the Midwest were used in this study. It is my recommendation that Brookshire Industries reconsider using the article Achieving High Organization Performance Through Servant Leadership as a template for the organization's future success. I recommend a more evidence-based article, which is Toward an Understanding of When and Why Servant Leadership Accounts for Employee Extra Role Behaviors. I suggest this as article number one's replacement. In comparing the two articles, Melchar's Article 1 was vague at points, and I found myself spending time looking for missing steps. On the other hand, Panaccio's Article 2 was more in-depth. It explained each step and method used. Panaccio clearly explained what servant leadership is, but Melchar was unclear about his purpose and, more importantly, the definition of servant leadership. Servant leadership has been generally tied to worker satisfaction. I chose this article because three additional items were added to this survey. Those items are interesting work, sufficient power, and responsibility. These have been shown to correlate satisfaction with work. There have been numerous studies on the subject of servant leadership. However, some are more well constructed than others. This presentation reviews two articles on servant leadership to determine which would be best for Brookshire Industries to use as a template to ensure the future success of this organization. I chose this article Toward an Understanding of When and Why Servant Leadership Accounts for Employee Extra Role Behavior as the evidence-based article that best suits Brookshire Industries.